We are back here on the Analyticaliowan podcast. It is Monday, June 8th, and we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, this is my second attempt recording this podcast, and it's not because of anything directly related to the news or anything like that. I didn't have a guest bail on me, which, reminder, um, I am still looking for guests for the show if anybody is interested. Um, Half tempted to reach out to some of the regulars over on the Rational Boomer and see if they are interested in doing a guest appearance. And let me know if you guys like it when I do the joint episodes with Mike, the Rational Boomer. And if you want to see him more often on this show as well. Uh, no, it wasn't a guest issue or anything like that. Ran into another issue with Zoom. This happens every now and then. I was in the middle of recording, um, and I got a phone call. So I paused the recording. I wanted to see who it was, um, and it's annoying, but I've got it. I had to switch phone numbers about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, somewhere in there. And ever since I've switched numbers, I have gotten a lot more scam calls and spam calls. But this one came up with a local number, and it was the name of a local business. And I thought maybe it had something to do with the fact that I've left my resume out on Indeed. Not that I'm necessarily looking for a different job or better hours or anything, but mostly pure laziness. I just never took it down. I never clicked the thing to say I wasn't looking for a different job. Um, so I thought maybe somebody was reaching out through there because I did update my phone number and stuff on there a while back when this all happened, just out of habit, trying to change things up. And I've even said, when asked about it, I'm like, if the right offer comes along, I'll at least listen. I'd be crazy not to. So I thought maybe it had something to do with that. Um, wasn't sure, so I go to answer it. Well, it was a scam call, and it's one I've been getting a lot of. And this is, I'm mentioning this twofold: one, to complain about the technical issue, but two, to remind you that these scam calls do exist. And I get a call like this at least once or twice a day from somewhere, just never usually with what looks like a phone number for for a local business. Usually it's just the phone number. And anyway, um, they call and say, "Hey, we're calling because of your Medicaid account, and it looks like there's going to be a food benefit or something very similar coming up, and we want to make sure you're aware of it." Two things: one, I don't have Medicaid, and two, that's not how that works. Obviously, that's a scam. Um, Voice almost sounds AI, like they wait for you to answer before they start talking. It's very clearly scammy. So just be aware of that these calls are going on. Um, and the weird thing is, I had never gotten calls, and it's definitely not this many calls until I switched numbers and switched carriers. I don't know if there is a connection or if I had done something with my previous number to somehow not get these calls. I don't know. But so anyway, I get this call. I go to answer it. Like I said, thought maybe it was a job offer, something like that. And when I go to answer the call, when I get back into Zoom, um, the entire front camera is blacked out, basically. It won't react. Now, if I flipped the camera around and recorded from the back camera, it would have done, and it was fine. But I couldn't record from the screen, and I couldn't figure out how to get it fixed. So I had to scrap the whole thing, start recording it again. Um, it was just a pain. So, uh, yeah, I just wanted to rant about that for a little bit. But technical issues aside, um, we are getting into it. We've got a lot to talk about, and there's always a lot to talk about. All right, so let's start with one of the biggest news stories. Um, Donald Trump sits down when he's in Wisconsin with Meet the Press and Kristen Welker, and it was aired yesterday. Now, this version of the story comes from The Hill. And if you haven't seen the clip yet, I encourage you to go look for it. There comes a point during Meet the Press where he walks away. Now, this is from The Hill. Like I said, President Trump abruptly ended his interview with NBC's Kristen Welker on Friday after the two discussed his unfounded claim that California gubernatorial primary was rigged. During a lengthy interview in Wisconsin that aired Sunday on Meet the Press, Trump repeated false claims that the 2020 presidential election was rigged and said it's happening right now in California. Former Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra on Thursday advanced to November's general election in the Golden State, according to the Decision Desk, with 73% of the vote in as of yesterday. Becerra leads Republican Steve Hilton by less than 1 percentage point. Now, before I move forward with that, if Hilton does get the nomination for the second nomination, I don't want to say Republicans because California has what is called a jungle primary. And the jungle primary is where, in this case, I think it's like 60 candidates ended up going against each other, all trying to capture the vote. And ultimately, what happened is, these 60 candidates all get a percentage or whatever, top two advance, regardless of how much percentage of the vote they get. They both go to November. Now, something certain people were worried about, and somebody you may hear on the program here from time to time, What, also known as Roy from California, he was very worried going into the election. And I understand where his fear came from because of how big the Republican field was. That or how big the field was in general. It could be a potential where it was two Democrats or two Republicans advancing on. And he was worried that if the Democrats did not get their act together, that they would end up having two Republicans as their only choice for governor in November. Now, it is entirely possible that it could end up being Xavier Becerra versus Tom Steyer, the current number 3 placeholder in this race, because they go with the top two. But if it ends up being Becerra versus Steve Hilton, like it is looking like, you can almost guarantee that all of the votes for Steyer are going to go for Becerra. And at that point, there's just no way that Hilton is going to make the difference up. Now, talking about the race, the president said it's been 4 days, and quote, they aren't even close, end quote, to coming up with the result, referring to how they take forever to count their vote. Now, what'll happen come November in the general election is they won't need 4 days to call California. They'll probably call California with 10 or 15% of the total vote counted in favor of Becerra. Now, how do they do that? Well, they look at where the votes come from and they look at voting trends and things like that, and they make very educated predictions based on how that is going to go. But see, Donald Trump doesn't like the fact that it takes him so long to count. He is convinced that he could have won California in 2020 and 2024, probably 2016, if they would have had a more fair voting process in his mind. He thinks all the votes should be counted by election night. And that's just not an option for them to do any of it, to count it all by election night. So uh, uh, he said, quote, "Do you know why they're doing that? Because they're cheating in the election," end quote. And I've been hearing the same thing out of MAGAs and Republicans on social media. Um, I've been blocking a lot of comments in comment sections for days now from people saying, "Well, the only reason it's taking so long is because they got to know how many votes to find." No, they're doing the thing you guys want. You want voter protection and voter ID, and to make sure only legal voters can vote. Well, with the exception of the voter ID at the polling place on election day, uh, they're doing what you want. They have to verify that uh, if John Smith, who voted in the LA mayor's race, making sure he didn't vote, the same person didn't also go vote in San Francisco for governor and in um, Oakland for governor and Sacramento and, you know, 3 or 4 other counties to make sure that uh, it's on the up and up and that the person who voted was on the voting rolls, only voted once, etc. And when you have 60 candidates you have to tabulate the votes for, it's not as simple as uh, a yes no. It will go slightly faster in November when they only have potentially 2 candidates and maybe a runoff spot or a write in spot, rather, um, where the write in won't have much of a chance at all, might get a fraction of a percentage point or something like that. Um, but there isn't this big deal. And when you are talking about population density, well, yeah, it's going to take a lot longer to count LA than it is to count some of the other locations. I've talked about it in other podcasts. Uh, one podcast over the weekend, I pulled up population density of counties here in Iowa, and I think it's Adams County here in Iowa is sitting at 3,600 people for the entire county, and there's over 500,000 people in Polk County. Of course, even though the polls close at the same time, we're going to have a final decision with 100% of the vote in Adams County way quicker than it's going to take Polk, period. And that's if every single person goes to vote. Hell, if every person in Adams County goes to vote, all 3,600 people, and only 10% of Polk County goes to vote, you would still logically have that vote total in way quicker because 10% of 500,000 is still 50,000 people. You're still looking at what would that be? 20 to 25 times the population at 10% of the voters showing up. It's ridiculous. But California has counties that are in similar situations. I'm not going to pull up their population density um, because I wouldn't know where their counties are, but that doesn't matter. Point is, LA, for example, has got the most population of any county, of any city in the state. It's going to take time. That's where all the people are. But MAGA is going to come out and they're going to show you the map with all these counties shaded in red, saying, "Well, see, California is mostly red. We're gonna win in November. These Democrats are just cheating." No, they're not. Like I said earlier, if Steyer is out of the race, all of his votes are more than likely going to go to Becerra, and Hilton doesn't have a chance. Now, Welker asked the president if he had evidence that the race was rigged. Trump replied, quote, "All I have to do is look. Do you think it's appropriate they have an election and 5 days later they're nowhere close to picking a winner?" End quote. Well, he's wrong on 2 things there. One, him looking is not evidence. Him looking at it because he doesn't understand it does not equate to evidence about there being election problems. For example, I'm going to throw this out there. It shouldn't be controversial because we've known for millennia that the earth is round, but there is a group of people who don't understand it and they automatically believe that the earth is flat and they're being lied to by places like NASA and the government and anybody else because they don't understand the math behind it. They don't see the curve of the earth, not because they can't comprehend the full size and scale that we are talking about. Um, and that is similar here to what Donald Trump's doing. If he is saying, well, I'm looking at it and I see fraud, that is not proof. That is not proof. Now, he said 5 days later, they're not nowhere close to picking a winner. First of all, they're not picking a winner. It's not like they're just sitting around going, oh, well, it's election day. Here's a hat. Yoink. Oh, Hilton wins and moving on. No, they're counting ballots. It's not picking a winner. It's counting and tabulating and coming up with an actual answer that is correct. Trump then added that election officials in California are crooked, along with Welker and her media colleagues. He remarked, quote, they're crooked just like you are crooked. Your press is crooked and Meet the Press is crooked, end quote. See, he does that a lot. He deflects. He wants people to believe the media is somehow against the American people. He does. He does that a lot. Why? Because when the media is reporting stories that make Donald Trump look bad and he says it's fake news or that the media is crooked, he thinks he's somehow winning the argument and that people are believing his version of events because he can't be wrong. He can't allow himself to be made to look foolish. Welker replied, to be fair, I'm not crooked, trying to move the conversation along. And then Trump dipped into personal attacks. He said, quote, you're either crooked or you're stupid. You play right into their hands with this crap. You know that these elections are rigged. Your network knows that they are rigged, end quote. Well, a couple of things. One, he goes to personally attack her. You're either crooked or you're stupid. Now, notice he only ever does that when it's a female reporter. He doesn't typically do that same move when he is dealing with a male reporter. It's just a fact. He doesn't play well with others. And then he goes on to say, well, you play right into their hands with this crap. You know these elections are rigged. Your network knows they're rigged. No, they don't. The only person who has ever made claims about the election being rigged has been Donald Trump. He tries to hold on to that narrative, and it ends up blowing up in his face. He thinks he can say it long enough and loud enough, and certain people will believe it, but he thinks the rest of us are going to believe it too. And that's because that might have worked in an era before the internet, before fact checking, or before easy fact checking. But then he attacks the news outlet. He said, that they're crooked and everything else. There was more back and forth from Welker about Todd Blanche. Trump said that the U.S. is like a third world country when it comes to administering elections. He said, quote, your elections are crooked and you're crooked and Meet the Press is crooked. And so is ABC and CBS and CNN. He then called NBC News a one-sided news network. One-sided crooked news network. Well, let's go on. Let's go look at that. Your elections are crooked. Kristen Welker and the press do not control the media. or do not control elections, rather. Elections are ran by the state. What does he mean by your elections are crooked? Who's he blaming? And then he immediately attacks her and says she's crooked. You notice he uses that a lot? I think it's projection because he is. He thinks everybody thinks the way he is. And Meet the Press is crooked. And then he attacks ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS. He goes after the main news networks again because he's not getting the coverage that he wants. Notice he doesn't go after Fox, OAN, Newsmax, places like that because they treat him with kid gloves and they say nice things about him, and that's what his ego demands. Now, uh, he goes on to say, quote, sorry, let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time. He then takes his he then took his microphone off and tossed it to the ground. Uh, Walker said she had traveled all the way to Wisconsin for this interview. Trump said he had given her enough time. President Trump said, quote, a country can never be great with a dishonest press, end quote. He stood up, walked away. Now, it did look like he had some trouble getting up. Like he almost reached for her shoulder to steady himself. That he thought that it looked like he may have gone down, or if he didn't do that. Now, I don't know from the clip I saw of him doing that, it looked more like he was reaching out, like to balance himself. I don't know if he actually did make contact with her. Um, and given the context, I don't know if she would have allowed him to stable himself like that. I would assume probably. But I don't know. And he stepped on the microphone on the way out. Now they could send him a bill if they wanted to for the destruction of the mic or whatever. I've seen people suggesting online since it happened that they should sue him for property damage for $10 billion because that's the number he uses against everybody else. And while funny, um, it doesn't matter. She hit him with these tough questions, and it wasn't even that tough of question. She just said, "What evidence? What evidence do you have?" And when he said, "I can see it," she goes, "Well, that's not evidence. What evidence do you have?" And he got mad. And if you watch him if you see this clip, and I encourage you to go look it up if you have not seen it, uh, his face turns red. He didn't look orange. He looked cartoon red face mad because he got called out to his face. He got called out, was asked for proof, and he didn't have it. So he storms out. And then he came out later with this. Now, he had just had an absolute meltdown. But he came out later and tried to suggest that it was somehow NBC News's fault or something like that. He released a statement saying he had done an interview in the most beautiful barn he'd ever seen. Quote, but it was raining and it was with NBC fake news. And because it was raining, I got a little bit angry with them. I was not happy with them, but we had a good time, end quote. He blamed the rain for his absolute meltdown. And if none of it makes sense with his whole thing. The weather shouldn't have any effect on the interview. They had been talking for 50 minutes before he stormed off. Um, and it was a planned hour-long interview, I'm assuming. He claimed he could be put on the edge just by rain. And it reminded me, we compare him to toddlers a lot, right? And it reminds me of toddlers having an absolute fucking meltdown when, even if there's no plans to go play outside, if they look outside and it's raining and you can't control it, and they're just not wanting a rainy day that day, and they can't do it. If that had anything to do with it, it means he's having trouble regulating his emotions. I don't know that it had anything to do with him actively, um, you know, being irritated, but he's trying to make it up that he was only bad enough to storm out, not because of what was being talked about, but because it was raining. See, he's now embarrassed again. And this is what happens with Donald Trump. You push him, you push him, you push him, and you can get him to storm out. You can get him to do these kind of things. And then, in his way of explaining it away, that it wasn't his fault and that he wasn't the problem in that interview, well, suddenly it was raining. What was NBC and Kristen Walker supposed to do? They were inside, they were undercover. Uh, from what I've seen, it does not look like they were in any kind of an open structure where rain was flying in, like where it was just a lean-to or something like that, but rather a actual closed area. Um, what did he want them to do? We don't have weather control options right now. This is not Star Trek. Uh, I know for my Star Trek nerds out there, um, at some point in the future, if Gene Roddenberry's timeline is to hold, we're supposed to have weather control technology. So at some point, there will never be another tornado, never another hurricane, and it would always be, you know, a controlled amount of weather all the way through, where you get when you do get rain, it would be an appropriate amount. You wouldn't get torrential downfall, things like that. Um, but I digress. This whole situation was just bizarre. And if they would have treated him like this during the 2016 2015 run up to the 2016 election and pushed him as hard as they have, since, or even just in this interview, um, that it would be, uh, you know, it would have been the downfall of Donald Trump. He wouldn't be president. He wouldn't have been president the first term because he was only able to win in part because the media was on his side, and the media was on his side because he was good for TV. He would say something outrageous, do something outrageous, and they would bring him in like a clown show. And they thought it was all, it was free ratings, which ratings mean money and means advertisers pay more money for ad space, things like that. And it was all good, except it got him even more exposure for free. And somehow it did help him win the 2016 election. If they would have pushed him back like this, um, it's entirely possible that he would not be president even the first time. And it's possible that um, going forward, this keeps up, right? That he ends up um, getting harder and harder and harder questions every single day, uh, because he is going to end up, um, you know, it's going to be good for uh, the network. It's going to be better ratings when they push back on him. See, they've gotten everything they can out of him by propping him up, and it's going to become a dog pile when he's on the way down. Um, okay. Moving on. Moving on here. Now, Donald Trump defends the anti weaponization fund, calling it a great idea. President Trump on Friday defended his administration's short lived, nearly $1.8 million anti weaponization fund, days after Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said the Justice Department was not moving ahead with it. Now, during this same Kristen Walker interview, he was asked about it. He said, quote, "So me personally, I think the weaponization fund is a great idea, and so do many other Republicans." You have to get it approved, and if they get it approved, that's great. If they don't get it approved, I'd be disappointed, end quote. Now, he's saying, well, yeah, you got to get it through Congress. He's saying that now. And I think he's only saying that now because there has been pushback. There was a judge that put a block to it, said it was illegal. They've reopened his case that led to that as part of the settlement, because the judge said there was issues there, and they're questioning whether or not there were things being misrepresented to the court, which could potentially lead to referrals for disciplinary action with the bar, contempt of court, things like that. Now, if you don't know what fund I'm talking about, Justice Department was trying to set up a $1.776 billion fund as part of a settlement with Donald Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS, which he dropped, saying that anybody who was prosecuted wrongly by this government and attacked based on their political beliefs um, could get a payout. But the way they worded it, they made it sound like it was only going to be for people who were prosecuted under the Biden administration, because this has been one of the Republicans and Donald Trump's biggest claims, is that they were only ever prosecuted because they were Republican. Now, on Capitol Hill, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle swiftly pushed back against the fund, many expressing concerns that individuals convicted of wrongdoing in connection with the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, including those who assaulted police officers, would receive taxpayer dollars. Nearly half of the 1,500 plus respondents in a recent Economist YouGov poll opposed the fund, including 48% of those who voted for Trump in 2024. Less than a quarter of those respondents supported for it, and 27% were not sure. However, as I said just a little bit ago, a federal judge in Virginia temporarily halted the fund from making any payouts, and a federal judge in Florida reopened Trump's case against the IRS, and the Department of Justice has scrapped the idea. Now, all the way back on Tuesday, Todd Blanche confirmed the pivot during a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing concerning the oversight of the Justice Department. He said, "We are not moving forward with the fund, period." Trump argued to Welker the fund is necessary for those who were destroyed by dirty cops and weaponization of the government. Donald Trump said, quote, "Many of those people should be compensated." Now, with that being said, as I understand it, the weaponization fund was going to set up a group of people that could be picked by anybody, fair people, smart people, and they will go on an individual case basis. I can tell you this, 90% of those people, if you look at them, the FBI or whoever it was, because you had a lot of crooked cops, you had dirty cops, end quote. Now, again, don't know exactly what he means there. as far because it's not a complete thought. But he is saying, well, and he says here, quote, they had the FBI agents ushering them into the building. Those people walking around, they're looking, oh, isn't this nice? They were being ushered into the building, end quote. He's going back to saying it was the FBI. Well, that's interesting, except for the fact that Donald Trump was president during January 6, 2021. It was his FBI director. Uh, but he is trying to go with the argument that they have used ever since the beginning, that it was just a peaceful protest and it wasn't a big deal. And now he is saying they deserve to get uh, money. And no, they don't. That Iran deal is done. So he won't stop talking about things like January 6, 2021 or the election of 2020 because he lost. That's a big chunk of it right there. He can't get past the fact that he lost. It's eating at him, it's driving him crazy. He lost, he knows he lost, and he doesn't know how to regulate his own emotions about it, about the fact that he lost. Because he's not used to losing. He has always had a way, in whether we're talking about business, personal life, or whatever, he's always had a way of spinning any situation to where it is somebody else's fault. Um, for example, when his casinos and other companies were going bankrupt, he he would always end up making money on the deal, and he could always blame the person that he left in charge of that company and say it was their fault, and it was never his. It wasn't anything they did. Despite the fact, like the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, one of the reasons it failed was because the contractor who built it did all the planning, and they looked at it and they said, well, it can only be so big. And he said, no, it's got to be this big because he wanted the biggest venue or in Atlantic City for a status symbol. And when he got it, it didn't go the way he planned. And then they ended up not being able to make any money because the building was too big. But it's never his fault. Now, Trump says Iran has not agreed on a peace deal because they're strong and proud. Again, this comes from The Hill. President Trump said Iran has not agreed to a deal to end the war because they're strong and they're proud, but noted they have no choice but to reach an agreement. Again, this was from NBC's Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. Quote, they're strong, they're proud. There are things they never thought they'd be doing that they're going to have to do, end quote. He said, quote, they've got no choice and it takes a little while, end quote. The president has rejected the rush to a long-term deal with Iran regarding its nuclear program and control over the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway where 1/5 of the world's oil is transported daily, or used to be transported daily. It has been closed since mid-March. We are coming up on 3 full months. And even though oil and gas prices are fluctuating some, it doesn't look like they are going to be back down overall anytime soon, and they're probably going to go up again. Now, while mapping out the road to an agreement, talks have also bogged down by a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed terrorist group based in Lebanon. Tehran's attack on U.S. allies in the Gulf, including Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, have added further pressure to a deal. President Trump told Welker, quote, I'm moving very fast. I'm into 3 months. Vietnam lasted 19 years. I'm into my third month, and all they do is say, whoa, when are you going to win? If I were a Democrat, no one would be talking that way, but it doesn't matter to me. I've gotten used to it, end quote. Except there's no comparison here to Vietnam. Vietnam was an entirely different situation. We were trying to defend South Vietnam as part of a UN deal. That was a ground war. That was authorized by Congress, I do believe. Um, and we were trying to protect a sovereign country. That's not what this is. This is Donald Trump on a whim going after Iran to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon that they would have been prevented from having if Donald Trump himself hadn't torn up the nuclear agreement deal that Barack Obama had negotiated with Iran that Donald Trump tore up during his first term. And him saying that if it was a Democrat, no one would be talking that way, I doubt it. I doubt it. Well, actually, no, he's probably correct because if it was a Democrat, we wouldn't be in this position. Remember, he said about the uh, the Democrats and Kamala Harris during the run up to the 2024 election. One of the things he liked to say about her is that she will drag us into a war with Iran. He said it about Joe Biden too. And yet here we are. And who's the one dragging us into a conflict with Iran? The US and Iran have agreed to a ceasefire in April, but both countries have continued to launch strikes in the region. Um, US military officials have described the attacks as self defense, while Iran accuses Washington of violating the ceasefire agreement over Israel's offensive operations in Lebanon. Iran said it would pull out of talks with the U.S. earlier this month due to the ground campaign against Hezbollah. See, and that's the problem here. Donald Trump doesn't control Israel. He doesn't control anything when it comes to all of it. Now, I was just talking about this. Donald Trump said in the run up to the election that it would be Kamala Harris who ends up leading us into a war with Iran. Said it about Hillary, said it about Joe Biden. Now, again, this comes from the Hill. Trump denies campaign push to finish endless wars, saying, quote, I didn't promise anything, end quote. President Trump denied Friday that he campaigned on avoiding endless wars as he seeks to reach a deal to end hostilities with Iran. He told Kristen Welker, quote, I didn't promise anything. I don't like these endless wars. This is not an endless war, end quote. He told Kristen Welker on NBC News' Meet the Press that interview that aired yesterday, quote, we've been doing this for 3 months. Much of it has been under a pretty good form of ceasefire, end quote. Yeah, again, he's trying to compare things. This conflict in Iran is not the same as what happened in Vietnam. And it's funny that he brings up Vietnam, considering he got deferred 5 different times from Vietnam, and somebody else's uh, son had to go in his place because he developed chronic bone spurs, among other issues, and couldn't go. And of course, he doesn't care about the military. He has referred to them as losers and suckers. The president later said that he would not have built the strongest military in the world if he was entirely against war. Now, last year, Donald Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill, which I call the One Big Bullshit Bill, because there's a lot of bullshit in it, that included $150 billion for defense, while the Pentagon requested a record $1.5 trillion for defense from Congress, which is a 42% increase relative to this year. Earlier this week, the House Armed Services Committee passed the annual defense policy bill, which puts it at 1.15 trillion in appropriated funding. Since he launched his first bid for the presidency in 2015, though, Trump has criticized lengthy U.S. wars in the Middle East during a February 2016 debate with Republican opponents on CBS. He blasted former President George W. Bush for the war in Iraq. He said, quote, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives, and we don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. We never should have been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East, end quote. That's what he said back in 2015. More than 8 years later, Trump pledged that if elected again, the quote, years of war, weakness, and chaos, end quote, would end. He said at the 2024 Republican National Convention, quote, I could stop wars with a telephone call, end quote. Now, see, that's part of his narcissism. He really believes his own hype, and he believes that that he is that powerful. Trump's biography on the White House website also lists, quote, putting an end or putting a stop to endless wars, end quote, as one of his top priorities. But before, during, and between his 2 terms in office, the president has also said that Tehran cannot have a nuclear weapon, the justification used to launch the war in Iran. 2 days before Election Day 2024, Trump said at a rally, quote, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. They are the single greatest threat, not just to the U.S., but the entire world, end quote. But again, if he would have left well enough alone and left that agreement in place with Obama, that Obama signed, then uh, then Iran wouldn't have gotten um, anywhere close to a nuclear weapon. But he ripped up the agreement. Why? Because he didn't like whose name was on the bottom of it, is the main reason. Now, I wonder if Republican voters that voted for Donald Trump because he was going to end the senseless forever wars, and now he says, I never said that. I wonder if they're having voters regret. I mean, it's not like we didn't call it back then, and we didn't say this is exactly what was going to happen. Every accusation when it comes to Donald Trump is a confession. And why is that? Well, I've put this theory out before, and see what you think about what I'm saying here. And that is that when he puts out something saying, well, the Democrats would bring us into a war with Iran, or like he said about Obama, that he's going to start a war with Iran because his poll numbers are low. That when he says those kind of things, he is doing it because that is what he thinks about. That is what he thinks he would do in certain situations, and he believes he is the most intelligent person ever. So when he says those kind of things and he thinks that way, he ends up going ahead and, um, believing other people will do the exact same thing that he would do because he can't imagine somebody else being smarter than himself. He can't imagine there being a difference. And in his mind, if he thought of it, it's the best idea that there could ever possibly be for any possible reason. And that's just the way it goes. That's how he thinks. So when he's making those accusations and things like that, it's because that is what he would do. And so when he accuses people, kind of rambling here a little bit, but when he accuses people, you know, it's because he doesn't see any other options. So that's why he says things like that. Now, Donald Trump does not have an exit strategy to get out of the Iranian conflict. He's going to keep continuing to backpedal and things like that. And it is going to be devastating for him when he finally has to admit that he was wrong. Now, when he's called out to his face, that's why he leaves like he does with the meet the press interview. He finally couldn't take direct questioning, being asked to provide evidence over what was his greatest loss, and that was the 2020 election. Now, today, Monday, later tonight, is the NBA Finals Game 3. Donald Trump is set to be in attendance. Now, a lot of New Yorkers are very, very pissed about him going to Game 3 uh, because he is going to be there. There are uh, limitations on watch parties outside the arena. Um, there had been plans to have, the way I understand it, big screens put up for people to watch the finals outside the arena, those that couldn't be inside. Um, Ticket prices are through the roof, and I know he doesn't control or set ticket prices. I'm not crazy, okay? Donald Trump doesn't set those prices. He uh, he's just the one going to the event. There's going to be heightened security. I thought I saw something about no bags being allowed inside, among other things. Um, but one thing I know for sure about sports fans is sports fans are superstitious. New Yorkers already did not like Donald Trump to begin with. And if he costs them game 3, for those that are Knicks fans, they are going to hate him forever. Especially if something happens and the Knicks collapse and ultimately lose the series. Um, we've seen it happen in baseball. Uh, there's the example with the Cubs, and I don't even remember who they were playing that year, but there was the year with Bartman, and where the fan reached out, caught the ball out in the outfield. It was ruled fan interference, even though the fielder really didn't have a line for it. Uh, you know, and I believe the Cubs still had another whole game or 2 games to play in that series, and completely fell apart and never recovered. And for a long time, Cubs fans still blamed Bartman for costing them that particular game in the series and their chance at winning a World Series or even going to the World Series. I believe that was in the NL Championship that year. I just don't remember what year that was. Um, so sports fans hold a vendetta. And if Donald Trump fucks around by going to this Knicks game, and it sounds like he's going to go, don't know how the fans are going to react. I'm expecting at least some boos. Um, and we will see how bad it actually got for him. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. As I talked about and I mentioned early on, uh, am available and open to having people join the show. Send me an email. We'll set up a time over Zoom. Analyticaliowan@gmail.com. We'll have a conversation. We'll talk politics, get your takes on things, answer questions you guys have. If you want me to explain how something in politics works or why a certain thing can't happen, etc., um, encourage you to go check that out. Uh, so I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow with another podcast.